The safe was covered in 20 years of hay, dust and secrets when my crowbar finally pried up that last floorboard. My hands were shaking, not from the physical work, but from the realization that everything I'd been told about old Jack Morrison's estate was a lie, a carefully constructed, deliberate lie. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 46 years old, and 3 months ago I became the most pitied man in Garrison County. My wife Sarah's grandfather died at 93, and his will was read in the law office of Miller and Sons on a grey Tuesday that felt like a funeral for more than just the old man. Jack Morrison had been a cattle rancher his whole life. 2,000 acres of prime grazing land, 300 head of Black Angus, equipment, water rights, and the original homestead barn from 1872. Everyone assumed it would be split between his children, Sarah's father Tom and her aunt Linda. Maybe a little something for the grandkids who'd helped work the place over the years. I'd worked that ranch for 20 years. Married Sarah when I was 26 and she was 23. Moved into a small house on the property. Spent 2 decades mending fences, birthing calves, fixing equipment, and treating old Jack with the respect he'd earned through a lifetime of hard work. We weren't rich, but we had purpose, community, a future we could see stretching ahead on that land. Then Jack died, and everything I thought I understood about family and fairness died with him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that reading of the will, because that's where this story really starts, in that lawyer's office that smelled of old leather and broken promises. Attorney Richard Miller cleared his throat and began reading in that practiced monotone lawyers use when delivering life-changing news. To my son, Thomas Morrison, I leave the entirety of my cattle herd, all grazing land and water rights, the ranch house and associated buildings, and all equipment necessary for continued operations. Tom sat up straighter, his face carefully neutral, but his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. His wife Patricia smiled tightly. They'd expected this. Tom was the son, the one who'd stayed close, the heir apparent. To my daughter Linda Harrison, I leave my investment portfolio and savings accounts, currently valued at approximately $400,000. Linda nodded, seemingly content. She'd moved to Denver 30 years ago and had her own successful real estate business. The money made sense. Then Richard paused, looking at Sarah and me over his reading glasses. My stomach twisted. To my granddaughter Sarah Reeves and her husband Daniel Reeves, I leave the original homestead barn and the 5 acres immediately surrounding it. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Sarah grabbed my hand. I heard Patricia actually laugh, a sharp, cruel sound quickly disguised as a cough. Tom's face split into a barely concealed grin. The original homestead barn, the one we'd been using for hay storage because it was too old and rickety for anything else. 5 acres. You can't run cattle on 5 acres. You can't farm 5 acres profitably. It was nothing. A token, a symbolic gesture that actually felt like an insult wrapped in legal language. That's it, Sarah's voice cracked. Just the barn? Richard Miller looked uncomfortable. There's a note here from your grandfather. He wanted me to read it to you specifically. He unfolded a piece of paper in Jack's shaky handwriting. The barn holds more than hay. Daniel will understand. Trust the foundation. What the hell did that mean? Tom stood up, already moving toward the door. Well, that's settled. Sarah, Daniel, you're welcome to take whatever you need from the barn before we convert it to equipment storage. The drive back to what used to be home was silent, except for Sarah's quiet crying. I gripped the steering wheel of our old Ford pickup so tight my knuckles went white. 20 years, 2 decades of my life poured into that ranch. I'd given up a job offer at an agricultural company to stay. I'd worked through injuries, through brutal winters, through years when the market was bad and we barely broke even. I'd done it because Jack promised me, not in writing, but in those conversations men have over fence posts and evening beers, that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded, that Sarah and I would have a future there. Your father knew, I said finally. He knew what was in that will. Sarah wiped her eyes. Dad's always been about the money. About ownership. He and Grandpa fought about it for years. Why would Jack do this to us? Did we do something wrong? I don't know, she whispered. That note, though. The barn holds more than hay. What did he mean? I had no idea, but I knew we had exactly 2 weeks to clear out our belongings from the house we'd rented from the estate. Tom had made that very clear as we left the lawyer's office. 2 weeks to figure out our entire future. We pulled up to the small ranch house where we'd raised our daughter Emma, who was now away at college studying veterinary medicine. Looking at it, knowing we'd have to leave, felt like having my heart ripped out. Sarah went inside to start packing. I couldn't face it yet. Instead, I walked to the old barn. 5 acres and a building that should have been condemned 20 years ago. My inheritance, my reward for loyalty. The afternoon sun slanted through gaps in the weathered wood siding, creating bars of golden light in the dust. I stood in the doorway, breathing in the smell of old hay and ancient timber, and for the first time in my adult life, I had absolutely no idea what to do next. That first week was brutal. We packed our lives into boxes while Tom and Patricia circled like vultures, already making plans for their property. They'd decided to tear down our house and build a modern equipment shed. The barn, my barn, technically, they wanted for storage. It's a waste of space just sitting there with hay nobody's using, Tom said the third day, standing in my doorway without knocking. I'll buy it from you. $5,000. More than fair for a building that's falling apart. $5,000 for a structure that had stood for 150 years. For the only thing Jack had left me. No, I said. It's not for sale. Tom's face darkened. You're being stupid, Daniel. What are you going to do with a barn and 5 acres? You can't make a living on that. I'll figure something out. You always were stubborn, he sneered. Maybe that's why Dad gave you nothing. He could see you'd never amount to anything without someone else's land under your feet. Sarah appeared behind me. Get out, Dad. This is my property now, Sarah. You're the guests here. We moved our belongings into the barn that weekend. It was humiliating, sleeping in what was essentially a shed, cooking on a camp stove, using a portable bathroom we bought from the hardware store. But I wasn't going to give Tom the satisfaction of begging. Emma called crying, offering to drop out of school to help. We forbade it absolutely. This wasn't her burden. As I lay on an air mattress that first night, listening to mice scurry through the walls and Sarah crying quietly beside me, I remembered Jack's note. The barn holds more than hay. Daniel will understand. Trust the foundation. In my exhaustion and anger, I dismissed it as old man rambling. But lying there in the dark, I started to wonder. Jack Morrison was many things, but he wasn't senile. He'd been sharp as a tack until the day he died. What if he'd meant it literally? The next morning, I started really looking at the barn with fresh eyes. I'd been in this building thousands of times over 20 years, but always just passing through, throwing down hay, storing equipment temporarily, shooing kids out during parties. I'd never really examined it. The foundation was stone, original river rock from the 1870s. The floor was wooden planks, worn smooth by over a century of use. The walls were thick timbers, hand-hewn, with gaps where the chinking had fallen out. I started in the northwest corner, methodically moving hay bales that had been stacked there for probably a decade. Some were rotted, falling apart, others were just dusty. Sarah watched me from where she was organizing our pathetic pile of belongings. What are you doing? Looking, I said. For what? I'll know when I find it. It took me 3 days. 3 days of moving every hay bale, sweeping decades of dust, examining every plank and post. I was about to give up, convinced I was going crazy, when I noticed something odd. There was a section of flooring in the old tack room that sounded different when you walked on it. Hollow. I got down on my hands and knees, running my fingers along the planks. They were the same age as the rest, weathered identically, but 3 of them had almost invisible marks, scratches maybe, or deliberate scoring. I found a crowbar in my pile of tools and carefully pried up the first plank, then the second, then the third. Underneath, set into the stone foundation, was a safe, not a modern safe, an old one, probably from the 1930s or 40s. heavy iron with a combination lock that was thick with dust. And on top of the safe, protected by a piece of oilcloth, was an envelope with my name on it. Not Daniel and Sarah, just Daniel. My hands shook as I picked it up. Inside was a letter in Jack's handwriting, dated 3 months before he died. I sat back on my heels and read the letter by the light of the afternoon sun streaming through the gaps in the barn walls. Daniel, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and my son acted exactly as I expected he would. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry you had to endure Tom's greed and cruelty, but I needed to know if you had the character I believed you did. A man's character shows not in prosperity, but in how he handles injustice. You could have taken Tom's offer for the barn. You could have walked away bitter. You didn't. You stayed and you searched just like I knew you would, because you're the kind of man who finishes what he starts. This barn was my grandfather's first building when he came here in 1872. Everything else came after. It's the foundation of the Morrison Ranch, and foundations matter. The safe contains documents. First, the original deed to this property, all 2,000 acres. My grandfather never officially transferred it to my father. It was always held in trust. That trust expires with my death. Second, you'll find proof that Tom has been embezzling from the ranch accounts for 15 years. I've known for 10. I documented everything. I kept quiet because he's my son, but I'll be damned if I let him prosper from it after I'm gone. Third, there's a second will, my real will, the one I signed 2 weeks before the one Richard Miller read. In it, I leave the ranch, the entire ranch, to you and Sarah. I left it here instead of with Miller because Miller's firm also represents Tom, and I no longer trust the appearance of objectivity. Take these documents to Judge Henderson. She's expecting you. I spoke with her before I died. The combination is your wedding date. I was there, remember? Best day I ever witnessed. You made my granddaughter happy. That matters more than blood. Jack. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper. Sarah had come up behind me and was reading over my shoulder. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Our wedding date, June 14th, 2003. I turned to the safe, my fingers trembling as I spun the dial. 6:14:03. The lock clicked. The door opened with a groan of old metal. Inside, exactly as Jack had promised, were documents. Thick folders, organized and labeled in his careful handwriting. I pulled them out carefully, laying them on the barn floor. The original deed was yellowed with age, dated 1872, made out to Jacob Morrison, Jack's grandfather. It had never been transferred. Instead, there were trust documents showing that the property had been held in trust for each generation, with specific conditions for transfer. Tom had never legally owned it. He'd been managing it, but ownership had always been contingent. The embezzlement evidence was damning. 15 years of falsified records, diverted funds, fake invoices. Jack had documented every instance, including bank statements and copies of checks. Hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from the ranch operation. And then the will. Properly witnessed, properly notarized, dated 2 weeks before the one Richard Miller had read. In this one, Jack left the entire ranch operation to Sarah and me. He left Tom a single dollar and a note. For the son who valued money over family. Linda got her investment portfolio, as in both wills. She'd stayed neutral in family politics, but everything else, the land, the cattle, the equipment, the water rights, it all came to us. With one condition, we had to find it ourselves. We had to prove we deserved it by not giving up. Why would he do it this way? Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. Why put us through this? I read the final page of Jack's letter, which I'd skipped in my haste. Because if I'd left it to you directly, Tom would have fought it. He would have claimed undue influence, that I was senile, that you manipulated me. But this way, he shows his true nature first, and you show yours. No lawyer can argue with that. Plus, I wanted Tom to have a few weeks thinking he'd won. Call it an old man's revenge. We sat in that barn until the sun set, reading through every document, making sure we understood everything. Jack had been meticulous. Every claim was documented, every piece of evidence was organized, every legal requirement was met. This wasn't the work of a confused old man. This was strategy. Around 8 that evening, Tom knocked on the barn door. We'd been so absorbed we hadn't heard his truck pull up. "Daniel, we need to talk about you vacating the premises. Patricia wants to start renovations next week and—" He stopped when he saw us sitting there surrounded by documents, the safe visible in the floor. His face went pale. "What is that?" "Grandpa's legacy," Sarah said coldly. "His real legacy." Tom's eyes darted to the papers, and I saw the moment he recognized what they were. "Those are private property. You have no right—" "They were in my barn," I said. "On my 5 acres. That makes them mine. There's nothing in that old barn but junk. Dad was losing his mind at the end. Whatever he told you, he told me where to find the truth," I interrupted. "The truth about the original deed. The truth about your embezzlement. The truth about his real will. The one leaving the ranch to Sarah and me." Tom's face went from pale to red. "That's impossible. The will was read. It's legal. You can't just—" "Judge Henderson is expecting us tomorrow morning at 9, Sarah said. "Grandpa made sure of that before he died. Made sure someone he trusted would hear the case. Someone who knows this family. Someone who won't be swayed by your lawyers." "You can't prove any of this," Tom blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. I held up the embezzlement evidence. 15 years, Tom. 15 years of stealing from your own father's ranch, from the family operation. He knew. He documented everything. He just waited to see if you'd show any remorse, any character. You didn't. Patricia's voice came from outside. "Tom, what's taking so long?" He turned and left without another word. We heard furious, whispered conversation. Then their truck roared away into the night, spitting gravel. We slept in that barn one more night, but this time it felt different. Not like a punishment, like a fortress, like home. Judge Catherine Henderson had been on the bench in Garrison County for 23 years. She was fair, tough, and owed nothing to anyone. Her office at the courthouse was lined with law books and family photos. She looked at us over her reading glasses as we sat down. "Jack Morrison came to see me 6 weeks before he died," she began without preamble. "Said he needed to make sure justice would be served after he was gone. Said his son was a thief and his son-in-law was an honest man. Asked me to hear you out when the time came. We laid out everything on her desk, the original deed, the embezzlement evidence, the second will. She examined each document carefully, making notes, asking precise questions. 2 hours later, she sat back. This is one of the most thorough cases of estate planning I've ever seen. Jack knew exactly what he was doing. The first will was bait, a test. This second will is legal, properly executed, and supersedes the first. The deed information is accurate. I can verify it against county records. And this embezzlement evidence—" She shook her head. "This is criminal. Tom Morrison should be prosecuted." "We just want what Jack intended," I said. "We don't need revenge." "The deal, that's admirably restrained," Judge Henderson said. "But the law is the law. I'll honor Jack's will, the real one. The ranch goes to you and Sarah, but I'm also obligated to report this evidence to the district attorney. Tom Morrison will face charges." Sarah and I looked at each other. Part of me felt guilty. He was her father, after all. But the larger part remembered the last 3 weeks of humiliation, the mockery, the cruelty. He'd made his choices. "There's one more thing," Judge Henderson said. "Jack left me something to give you after we met. Said you'd earned it." She pulled out a sealed envelope from her desk drawer. Inside was a check for $50,000 and another note from Jack. "For Emma's veterinary school, for your new start, for being the son I should have had. Build something good on that land. Make the Morrison name mean something again. Jack." The legal process took 6 weeks. During that time, Tom hired 3 different lawyers trying to contest the will. None of them could find grounds. The second will was airtight. The deed evidence was irrefutable, and the embezzlement was so well documented that 2 of his lawyers quit rather than defend him. Linda, to her credit, called Sarah. "I'm not fighting this," she said. "I looked at the evidence. I knew Tom was sketchy with money, But I didn't know it was this bad. Dad did the right thing. Take care of the ranch. The formal transfer happened on a crisp October morning. Judge Henderson signed the orders, the county clerk updated the deed records, and just like that, the Morrison Ranch belonged to Sarah and me. Tom and Patricia had already moved out, into a small rental in town, while they waited for the criminal trial. They'd taken only their personal belongings. Everything else, all the equipment, the cattle, the years of accumulated ranching infrastructure, came to us. That first night, as actual owners, Sarah and I stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the prairie gold and purple. Our daughter Emma was coming home for the weekend. Our ranch, our legacy, our future. He could have just left it to us directly, Sarah said, saved us 3 weeks of hell. But then we wouldn't have proven we deserved it, I said. We wouldn't have shown our character, and Tom wouldn't have shown his. Jack needed us all to be tested, to show our true selves. Think we passed? We're standing here, aren't we? That weekend we had a small gathering. Emma, Linda, some neighboring ranchers who'd been friends for years, and Judge Henderson, who came unofficially as a friend. We stood in the old barn, the barn that had seemed like an insult but had held the key to everything. To Jack Morrison, I raised a beer. A man who understood that the best inheritances aren't just about what you leave, but how you leave it. Everyone drank to that. The first year as owners was hard work, but rewarding. We had to learn the business side, the parts Jack had handled quietly for years, but we also discovered things Tom had neglected, fences that needed serious repair, cattle health programs that had been cut to save money, relationships with buyers that had soured due to Tom's arrogance. We fixed what we could. We invested Jack's $50,000 into improvements. Emma came home on breaks to help, bringing her veterinary skills to the herd. She'd graduate in 2 years and wanted to come back full-time, a 5th-generation Morrison on the land. The embezzlement trial happened in spring. The evidence was overwhelming. Tom pled guilty to avoid a harsher sentence. He got 3 years in prison and full restitution. Over $300,000 he'd stolen over 15 years. Patricia divorced him before he even went to jail. Sarah struggled with it, watching her father led away in handcuffs, even knowing he deserved it. He made his choices, I reminded her gently, just like we made ours. He could have been honest. He could have worked with Jack instead of against him. He chose greed. I know, she said. It still hurts. That means you're a better person than he is. One evening, I was doing paperwork in Jack's old office, our office now, when I found one final letter tucked into a drawer. It was addressed to me, dated the day before he died. Daniel, if you're reading this, you won. Not just the ranch, but the test of character. I watched you for 20 years, watched how you treated animals, how you treated workers, how you treated my granddaughter. You never took shortcuts, you never stole credit, you never complained about the hard work. Those are rare qualities. My son has none of them. He's smart and ambitious, but he's hollow where it counts. You're the opposite. You might not always be the smartest in the room, but you'll always be the most honest. That matters more. The letter continued. I built this ranch from nothing, just like my grandfather did. We Morrison men, we're builders. But I failed with Tom. I gave him too much too easy. He never had to struggle, so he never learned to value what struggle creates. You struggled your whole life. You know what hard-won things are worth. Sarah will be a good partner in this. She has her mother's strength and my stubbornness. Emma has potential to be the best of all of you, smart, compassionate, and tough. 3 generations to turn it around. I'm betting on you. The barn test was necessary. I needed to know you wouldn't quit when things seemed unfair. Lots of folks would have taken Tom's $5,000 and left bitter. You stayed. You searched. You trusted my word even when it seemed crazy. That's character. Use the ranch well. Don't make my mistakes. Don't spoil the next generation. Make them earn it. Make them prove they deserve it, but also love them, support them, believe in them. That's the balance I never found with Tom. You'll do better. I've seen you with Emma. You already know how. One last thing. There's money in the safe I didn't mention, 50,000 more. I want you to use it for something that matters, something that builds community. A scholarship fund, a youth rodeo program, something that helps other kids like you and Sarah were, kids with potential but no resources. Pay it forward. That's how legacies work. Thanks for being the son I needed. Sorry I couldn't say it to your face. Tom would have fought harder if he knew how much you meant to me, but you know now. That's what matters. Take care of my girls. Take care of my land. Build something that lasts. Jack Morrison. I sat there crying. Something I hadn't let myself do through all of this. Not tears of sadness, but of gratitude, of validation, of understanding finally why Jack had done things this way. Sarah found me like that. I showed her the letter. She cried too. 2 years later, the Morrison Ranch Scholarship Fund gave its first awards, $5,000 each to 3 local kids planning to study agriculture, veterinary medicine, or ranch management. Emma spoke at the ceremony, talking about her great-grandfather's legacy and the importance of supporting the next generation. The ranch was thriving. We'd paid off the restitution debt Tom owed, decided it was cleaner to settle it ourselves than chase him for money he'd never have. We'd expanded the herd, improved our breeding program, and built relationships with premium buyers who appreciated quality. Tom got out of prison after 18 months for good behavior. I saw him once at the feed store in town. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. He nodded at me but didn't speak. I nodded back. No words were necessary. Some bridges burned completely. Patricia had remarried, a banker from the city. Linda came out to visit twice a year, and we had a good relationship built on honesty and mutual respect. The old barn, the barn that had seemed like an insult, we restored it, replaced rotted boards, reinforced the structure, but kept its character. We used it for community events now. The safe remained in the floor, empty but visible, with a small plaque, Jack Morrison's legacy, character tested, trust rewarded. On quiet evenings, I still walked out to that barn and stood where I'd found the safe, under all that hay. I thought about how close we'd come to walking away, how close I'd come to accepting Tom's $5,000 and leaving bitter. Jack had known. He'd known me better than I knew myself. He'd known I wouldn't quit. That I'd search, that I'd trust. The barn had held more than hay. It had held the truth. It had held justice. It had held a legacy that couldn't be bought or stolen, only earned. And we'd earned it. Not through birthright or luck, but through character tested in fire and found worthy. That's the inheritance that matters. That's what lasts. That's what we'll pass to Emma and whatever comes after. Not just land, not just cattle, but the understanding that how you handle adversity defines you more than how you handle prosperity. Jack taught me that from beyond the grave, with a barn, a safe, and a test I didn't know I was taking. Best lesson I ever learned.